Hello, my name is John Dede, professor of political science at the community colleges of Baltimore County. Welcome to the Maryland State Politics and Government podcast on Substack. Today, I am honored to have legendary Congressman Steny Hoyer from Maryland's 5th Congressional District with us today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, John. I'm glad to be with you.
Yeah, glad to do this today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and educational for a lot of people to be able to, participate in this and, get a chance to hopefully learn a little bit and get some ideas about a few things too, as far as, memories of things you've done and all that good stuff. I think it's good. I think it's going to be educational for everybody.
Great.
Okay. My first question is, what do you consider your greatest accomplishments?
Well, John, first of all, I think probably the overall, I'm pleased that people who I represent and people that I've served with are being very, very gracious in terms of their observations about my success in working in the Congress and my success with working with them, both my constituents and the people in Congress. So overall, I'm really pleased about that. Specifically, of course, I think my probably greatest legislative achievement was the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I was the sponsor of that bill on the House side and worked very close with a number of people, both on the Democratic side and Republican side. And it was signed into law by George H.W. Bush in 1990. So it was a very bipartisan bill as well. So, John, I think if I had to make a choice of one, it would be the Americans with Disabilities Act. Then I also sponsored in 2002 or 2003, 2002, the Help America Vote Act, which was a bill to try to facilitate and make easier people's having the ability to cast what is their most important voice in a democracy, their vote. And so I think those two bills probably, although I was the principal sponsor on both those, but also I was a majority leader when we passed the Affordable Care Act, which has opened up insurance to millions of people, some 20 million people, and tried to make their health care affordable. And we all know that we're all going to get sick at some point in time, and we're going to need access to health care, and it needs to be affordable and available. So I think that bill. The other bill that I'm really proud of is the infrastructure bill that we passed in the 117th Congress. Again, I was majority leader, and we invested over $1 trillion in America's infrastructure, which I think is leading to a resurgence of our economy and our ability to compete globally, which has become a much more competitive world than when we grew so substantially in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s. So I think those are some things I'm proud of. I'm also proud of the fact that I was the majority leader and chief proponent of the D.C. Voting rights bill, the D.C. statehood bill, which passed the House. Unfortunately, didn't pass the Senate. And I've also been a strong supporter of Puerto Rican statehood. That's about 4 million American citizens who, under present law, do not have representation in the Congress of the United States that can vote, either in the Senate or the House. And we have states that are substantially smaller than those. And I think it's not fair. And those American citizens and jurisdictions ought to be able to have representation. In terms of my district, I think my biggest accomplishment was getting the FBI to select, along with the General Services Administration, selecting Greenbelt as the site of a new FBI building. Unfortunately, the President, Trump, has not been supportive of that effort and has held it up. But I think the GSA made the right decision for the FBI, the right decision for law enforcement, and the right decision for our country. So those are some of the things, John, that I'm proud of and will look back on as good accomplishments.
My next question's basically, it's kind of a little bit of a trip down memory lane for, I think, a lot of people in general. And what I'd like to do is talk about some people from the past and have you offer your thoughts and comments about them, because you have served or known these people for a long time. And I think for a lot of people, we often lose our history with a lot of stuff.
Right.
And the first person I want to talk about is Marvin Mandel.
Well, Marvin Mandel was the speaker when I went to the General Assembly. And of course, I went to the state Senate. And Ted Agnew was elected governor at the same time as I was to the state Senate. And as you recall, he became the vice presidential candidate in 1968. I was elected, he was elected in 66. So he left being governor when he was elected vice president, and there was a vote to succeed him. And it ended up being between the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. And of course, I was a member of the Senate, and I voted for the president of the Senate, Bill James. But to nobody's surprise, the House, that had 3 times as many votes as the Senate, elected Marvin Mandel, their Speaker, as governor. And I think personally that Marvin Mandel record as governor and as Speaker was one of the best in our history. He was a very, very productive governor, both on healthcare issues and on other issues, including education. And I think he unfortunately got in trouble and was convicted of a crime and stepped down or stepped aside as he had to as governor. And then Blair Lee, the then lieutenant governor, became the acting governor. And as you may know, I subsequently ran with Blair Lee as governor, and we lost. But nevertheless, it was a good opportunity. But I think Mandel was a good governor. I think most people that served with him thought he was a good governor. And of course, ultimately, he was pardoned by President Reagan based upon a determination that they thought his conviction was, I think, from what I'm informed about, that the law was enforced and the jury found in a way essentially inconsistent with the evidence. But he was a good governor.
What about Blair Lee? I remember reading and learning about that you ran as a team for governor and lieutenant governor. I remember someone once called it the Montgomery.
He ran for governor.
George's,
I ran for.
Yeah, but Montgomery Prince George's Alliance. What was Blair Lee like?
Blair Lee was a very, very competent, very able, very intelligent, and good state senator from Montgomery County, and then Secretary of State, and then candidate for lieutenant governor in victorious Mandel ticket, and therefore was lieutenant governor at the time Mandel was forced to step aside. And I ran with him, and he would have been a very good governor. But he was, of course, subbing for a governor who had been convicted of a crime. And that was a very tough battle for him to overcome, his association with Mandel. And so he lost that election to a reformer, another very good friend of mine, Harry Hughes, who, by the way, had asked me to run for lieutenant governor with him. At the point in time he asked me, really hadn't been, he hadn't raised much money, and he was not perceived to be a very formidable candidate. Of course, he not only became a formidable candidate, he won.
That's the thing about politics. You got to run in the race and you never know what's going to happen.
That's true.
What about William Donald Schaefer?
Uh, William Donald Schaefer, I think, was one of the best American mayors of all time. What he did in Baltimore was extraordinary. And he was perceived, I think, rightfully so around the country as mayor. And then, of course, he became governor and then subsequently comptroller. And he was not as successful as governor. His job that suited him best was being the mayor of Baltimore, and he performed that job in a way that I think garnered him great accolades from around the country. But as a governor, he was more frustrated as governor. He had to deal with a legislature that was not as cooperative as the city council, Baltimore City Council, had been. And I think he was a good governor, but his greatness was as mayor of Baltimore.
I would agree with you with that. Also, the other problem I felt Schaefer had was during most of his service as governor, he had bad economic times, and it's hard to be generous with voters and do programs when we have a tough economy.
Yeah, that's of course true. I agree with you.
What about Harry Hughes as a governor? How was he?
Governor Harry Hughes was, I think, brought great integrity, great judgment, a calmness, a steadiness, a reliability factor. He was, now understand, Harry Hughes, I spoke at his funeral. He and I were very good friends. And I served on the Committee on Budget and Taxation, which he chaired. And as a result, we became very close friends and until the time of his death. So I think he was a good governor. He also had a crisis, the financial crisis, the savings and loan crisis, occurred during his term, his 8 years, and he handled it, I think, effectively. But it was obviously a great challenge for him and for our state. But I think his role in it was a steadying role. He was a good human being.
Another person I want to talk about, and I recently did some research on him, and I read what the Congressional Record comments you made when Louis Goldstein died. I mean, this man was larger than life, and life is pretty big.
Yeah. Louis Goldstein was one of America. There was a excuse me, I've been outside, and I think the allergies are getting me. But in any event, he was an individual who was brilliant, but he had a very folksy style, the God bless you all real good style, from a rural county that I now represent in the Congress of the United States, Colbert County. But he was a controller longer than anybody else in our state history, and brought a lot of really outstanding reforms to that job, a job that Brooke Learman now has. And he also ran for the United States Senate in 1964, and he'd been comptroller and president of the Senate before that. He'd been president of the Senate before that. And he was not as effective as a candidate. And it was time for a young reformer, and Joe Tidings beat him. But Louis remained as comptroller for many years thereafter, and was, I think, one of the most loyal and active Democrats that I have served with throughout my lifetime. He was a man of great principle, and as I say, great intellect. But his intellect, as I say, he sometimes hid with his very folksy, humorous, down-to-earth style. But he was a very good person and a very excellent public servant.
I want to talk about a couple people who were never elected to office, but have had a huge impact on Maryland history in general. First person, Bruce Bariano, one of the top lobbyists. If you want to think about the top two lobbyists ever in the state of Maryland, Bruce Bariano is one, and I don't think anyone could guess who two would be.
Who two would be?
Yeah,
Well, I don't want to.
yeah, I mean, because
I don't want to make that guess.
Yeah, Bruce is
but
such
Bruce,
bigger than life. But what is he? What is he like?
Well, first of all, Bruce was my counsel when I was president of the Senate for 4 years. He was my principal counsel and advisor and liaison with the members of the Senate. And he demonstrated the kind of energy and attention to detail that has made him so successful. And to this day, he tends to be one of the most thorough people in terms of dealing with issues that I know of, and extraordinarily good at keeping in touch with members as well as clients. And that's made him successful. And he's had his ups and downs, as you know. He did some things that were not consistent with law, and he paid a heavy price for that. But notwithstanding that, he came back strong. And because of his credibility and with so many members of the General Assembly and with previous administrations, he has been so successful. But he's a dynamo. And if you meet Bruce Bariano, the chances are you're not going to forget him.
I'll keep that one in mind because I've interviewed him a few months ago, and it was just so dynamic by the time we spent talking.
Right. Yeah, that's Bruce.
What about John Moog?
Well, John is my dear friend, and we've been friends since I was elected to Congress. But actually, before he drove me when I was running for governor and lieutenant governor in the race that I ended up running for lieutenant governor with Blair Lee in 77, 78. So I know him very well. He is a leader. He was a leader in college. He's a leader in his community. He's a leader in business. And he was a very successful lawyer for some very large firms and also a very large investment advisor and broker for Legg Mason, one of Maryland's historic firms. John Moog is a person of great ability, great integrity, and great success. And he's my dear friend to this day.
What about Barbara Mikulski? She had a huge impact on the state of Maryland.
There's no doubt about that. Barbara Mikulski not only had a huge impact on Maryland, she had a huge impact on the nation. She holds many records. There's a Barbara Mikulski room in the United States Capitol. She is one of a kind. She is the shortest giant you will ever meet. A giant in terms of spirit, presence, impact, and what she did for women, not just in public service, but what she did for women's rights and women's inclusion was historic and had an extraordinary impact, probably here and probably around the world. And she is also one of the most quotable people you will ever meet. I used to say when you're in a press conference with Barbara Mikulski, don't worry about what you're going to say because what they're going to cover is a Barbara Mikulski quote. And she's still going strong, as you know. As a matter of fact, I think today is her birthday. Either today or tomorrow, her birthday. I'm going to give her a call.
What about Mac Mathias? He had a huge impact on Maryland in the 70s and 80s.
Well, he had a huge impact on Maryland, and he was the kind of Republican that we need today, and we needed him then. He was the kind of Republican who looked at issues and made decisions not on politics but on merits. He was committed to environmental issues. He saw the environmental movement before it really became a movement, and he saw the critical necessity, particularly with the Chesapeake Bay, but with the environment generally, to make sure that mankind was a good steward of the environment that they inherited and that they wanted to leave to their children and grandchildren. And he was also a very strong supporter of civil rights. And I know that he was always a voice that represented the best of America, the best of its ideals, the best of its promises. So Mac Mathias, you're right. Not only was he came from Western Maryland, extraordinary representative of that area of our state, but also a representative of the best values that our country has enunciated in terms of civil rights, human rights, individual rights. He had the courage of his convictions and served Maryland very well.
Barbara Mikulski turns 90 today.
Right.
Next person I'll ask about is.
Did you want me to comment on that fact? I'm 87, so I don't think I'll ever catch up with her because I think she's going to keep on going forever.
It would not surprise me. What about Larry Hogan?
Well, Larry Hogan. Now, which one are you talking about? The first Larry
the
Hogan.
We'll talk about the son, the former
son.
governor.
Well, I've known the son since I think he was probably 18 or maybe even younger when I first met him. Larry Hogan, of course, was a member of the Congress and one of the predecessors in the seat that I now hold. And so I knew his father well. And as a matter of fact, represented his father in a petition before the Court of Appeals of Maryland to be admitted to the Maryland bar based upon his contribution and his education as a member of the House Judiciary Committee during the time of the debate of Richard Nixon. His son ran against me. Ironically, he was a strong supporter of mine for a number of elections, and then he ended up running against me in 1992. And we had, like any campaign, some harsh words for one another. But he became governor, and we worked together when he was governor. He was a governor, a popular governor, who tried to proceed with common sense. He was a person that had the courage to say, Donald Trump does not share my values. He doesn't share the values, he said, of the party, the Republican Party, and he did not think he was qualified or should be president of the United States. I think he was admired in our state for that kind of courage. Frankly, we all agreed on his conclusion on that matter. But then, of course, Larry, who said he wasn't going to run for the Senate, did run for the Senate against a candidate that I was very close to and very strongly supported, Angela Also Brooks, who was then the Prince George County executive and is now the United States Senator. Larry, I'm sure, did not expect to lose that race, but he did. But I think hopefully he's doing well. And his wife is a very good friend of mine. Yumi Hogan is a wonderful person, does good things, and is very close to my daughter. So the Hogans and I have had a checkered sometimes, but part of that time, a significant part of that time, has been a positive relationship.
Last person I'll ask about to reminisce on is Mickey Steinberg. He recently died a few months ago. What about him?
Yeah, no, I was at his funeral. I went to his funeral. He was a former president of the Senate, as was I, and am, and he was a good friend of mine. We served together in the state Senate for 12 years together until I left. And then he ultimately became president of the Senate and lieutenant governor of our state. And he was a good, sound voice for Marylanders, and a voice for sound government and good practices in our government. So I remember him fondly. He and his wife Anita, good friends.
Last thing I want to ask about, and it touches on a couple things. I remember the big role Larry Hogan played on January 6th, as far as the calls you made to him to get help when the Capitol was under siege. How do you see the future of American politics and government after Trump?
Well, I hope that we will have a renewal of our values, a renewal of our morals, renewal of our commitment to individual rights, a commitment to rational, bipartisan, and each branch of government, the Congress, the executive, and the Supreme Court, acting in a positive way with one another, not necessarily agreeing, because that's not our democracy. We have disagreements. But Donald Trump, I think, has brought America low in the esteem of the world and the judgment of many Americans. And it's unfortunate for our country. And I lament what Donald Trump has done and what he's represented. Clearly, in my view, he's focused on profit and power as opposed to people. And I think that's unfortunate. So I think a post-Trump world will try to be, I think, to revitalize America's democracy, reprotect America's democracy, and make sure that the American people understand why our democracy is organized by our founding fathers as it is, to protect against the abuse of power, the centralization of power, which is what Donald Trump and those who work with him and for him have as an objective. So we're going to have our work cut out for it. But America is a strong, vibrant, good country. Its people are good people. And I think that we will sort of stabilize our democracy, protect our democracy, and survive as a beacon for the rest of the world.
Thank you again for this time you've taken with me, and good luck in retirement.
John, thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Welcome.
Bye.